This is a quick guide on our RoyalStone Balustrade System installation. It is also available on our website as a PDF guide. Before we get started with the installation instructions, these are the required tools needed for assembly. Unload and unpack your order. Make sure all the parts and pieces are there. Make sure everything is stored on a solid, flat surface. Place your newel posts where they will be installed. Center them properly, using a rubber mallet to tap them gently in place. Using a pencil, outline the newel post on the substrate. Make sure to level the newel posts using plastic shims. You may need to use a grinder to make sure the newel posts sit perfectly flush on the substrate. Remove newel posts. Mark locations of rebar for concrete installations or flange and pipe used for either concrete or wood installations. Using a hammer drill, drill the proper diameter holes. For rebar installation, make sure to thoroughly clean the hole with wire brush and compressed air to ensure there is no dust left inside. Using concrete epoxy, set the rebars in. For flange installation, use Tapcons or wood SS screws to set the plates. If installing this on a deck that has gaps between boards, use duct tape to cover the gaps within the outline of the newel post. Make sure there is adequate blocking at all newel post locations. The entire balustrade system is anchored by these posts. Once all locations are set, place the newel posts back in their spots. Measure each rail length at the bottom of the post. Depending on the temps and when you are installing, adjust the rail length accordingly to accommodate for expansion and contraction. This information can be found on the online guide. Place the rails on sawhorses and mark them to the length needed. Using a large speed square, mark the lines around the rail. Using a skill saw with a diamond blade, cut the rail to length. Using a grinder with a diamond blade, clean off each end and bevel edges. Repeat until all rails have been cut to proper lengths. Make sure you identify where each rail goes. Lay the bottom rail on sawhorses and figure out the spacing for code compliance, which would be at 4 inches sphere. This requires some math to be done on site. Mark the spacing using a speed square and mark the center point of the rail. Lay the top rail next to the bottom rail and make sure they are perfectly lined up. Using the speed square, transfer the baluster spacing to the top rail. Mark the center points and repeat on all rails. Lay the rails down on flat ground and using the recommended hole saw, proceed to drill out the holes needed for the balusters. Repeat on all rails. Place the bottom rail spacers or support blocks as indicated on the guide using 3-foot centers. Use proper adhesive to glue the support blocks to substrate. Put a dab of silicone glue on top of each spacer. Gently set the bottom rails and make sure not to move the spacers. Use wedges to lock the bottom rail from sliding around on the glue. Leave these in place overnight. Take a small piece of top rail from the cutoffs and cut out a 1.5-inch wide center slot on the bottom of that rail. Using a pencil, outline the bottom rail onto the newel post. Place a baluster on each side. Place the top rail centered on the newel post and trace the top rail on the newel post using a pencil. Repeat at all locations. Remove the cutoff in the baluster that was used to trace the top rail. Remove the newel posts and by using a ruler or wood shims, transfer both the top and bottom rail pin locations with a pencil. Once all holes have been transferred, drill the holes out using the recommended hole saw. Set the bottom rails using the pins to lock into the newel posts. The spring-loaded pins should have the spring part inside the rails. Use 2 pins per rail end. See the PDF guide for best practice. Using the manufacturer suggested adhesive or caulking, which would be BASF Sonolastic NP1 or Vulcan by Tremco. Put a bead of adhesive or caulking around each hole on the bottom rail. Gently set the balusters down and make sure they are all placed right side up and that the top and bottom flat surface is cleaned off from any residual material. Once they are set, using the same adhesive or caulking, put a bead around the pipe at the top of the baluster. Keep about 1/2 inch away to ensure the bead grabs the top rail. Gently set the top rail in place. Start on one end and work your way down. You will need 3 people or more depending on the rail length to do this. Tap each baluster into the respective holes. The newel post at this point can be gently moved to help with the insertion of pins. Once the entire system is assembled, take the Royal-Crete mix out. Using a paddle and mixer, mix the material for 4 to 5 minutes to get it fluid and to the temperature needed. Add the catalyst and mix thoroughly for another 30 seconds. Pour roughly 8 to 10 inches of material inside each newel post. The material cures fully within 45 minutes. Once the material cures, using the recommended caulking, caulk all rails to the newel post first. Then put a bead of caulk around the newel post hole. Set the caps. Caulk the underside of the cap to the newel posts. Caulk each baluster top and bottom to the rails. This concludes the guide on how to install our balustrade system on flat surfaces. There are more videos on stair installations, railing to column installations, as well as other products. Again, thank you for considering our products for your project.